Hello, everyone, and welcome to our live podcast with Amber Karnes. It's great to have you here, Amber. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I also want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Offering Tree. Amber, I don't know if you know who Offering Tree is. I feel like I sent a connection email to you.
You did. Actually, Jeev and I met with them the other day. Yeah, I'm excited about Offering Tree. We're going to maybe partner with them on some things.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
They're a company, in case our connected yoga teachers who are listening are not sure who they are, they're a company that's really helping yoga teachers right now with their online offerings. So it goes along well with today's conversation. And if you're over there and you're looking around and wondering, how can I check it out and sign up? I have a little promo code here, offeringtree.com/Shannon. And they've done some pretty exciting things. They've got us up on integrated with Zoom now. You can have a membership on there. You can have your courses and your classes. So it's really cool. Let's dig in. First of all, Amber, how are things this week, this month, this year? How are things going with you?
It's a wild time to be alive, huh? I'm okay in the grand scheme of things, and also I'm not okay a lot of the time. Like, I'm disturbed by, the past week and the past year and the past 4 years and, the past 400 years in America. But I, and a lot of my work connects through to social justice. And so I've just been in conversation with a lot of folks this week that are, feeling unsafe, and totally understandably so. And so, I myself have a lot of, turmoil and insight around what's going on and seeing people be harmed and really caring about that. So I'm just trying to care for my own nervous system so that I can be fortified enough to continue this work, because I think it's really worth doing this work of equity. And, but, we have to care for ourselves too. And I think, that's kind of a cool thing about the yoga practices. It really gives us those tools to turn within and do self-study and care for our bodies and our minds and our nervous systems. But then it gives us that call to turn back out and then go do the work of making sure that everybody can have that liberation that I think we're all after with this practice. So I've just been in reflection about that a lot this week. And it's I don't know. I'm struggling a little bit, and I think that's okay. I really think it's if you feel disturbed by the state of the world currently, to me, that's a good sign. That's a sign that you're still alive and connected to humanity, like yours and the humanity of others. So I try not to push those feelings away, but feel them and process them, and then use that as a catalyst to make change and move forward. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
That's amazing. I'm so glad that you brought this up, because I think a lot of our yoga teachers are feeling similar things. They have to show up and be in front of their students. When you and I booked this call, a lot of the events of the past couple of weeks hadn't happened yet.
Yeah.
A lot has happened even since we first decided to talk about what does the future hold for yoga teachers. And I think we're starting to look at what does the future hold for people in the US and around the world, as well as that. So I love how you said that you go inward and you do that work so that you can then share with the world. Is there anything else that really helps you, or you have heard from yoga teachers that is helping lately?
I think I just the things that really help me is coming back to the stuff in the practice that really helps me to regulate myself so that I can have the courage or the fortitude or whatever it is to have difficult conversations, or to speak up when I need to, or to, gather people together virtually, distantly, however, energetically, to care for folks who, aren't centered in the world that we live in right now, and who are actively harmed by the systems of oppression that we live in. And so I think it's a bit of, caring for ourselves, but also for me, just knowing who my Team Amber is, those supportive people in my life who, when I'm having that crisis of confidence, or maybe I can't do this, when I'm going through something, that they can kind of hold up that mirror and say, remember who you are, And so I think I would encourage folks to what are your resources? This is a question that one of my favorite teachers, Michelle Cassandra Johnson, talks about in her workshops, which is making a list of the ways that you can resource yourself, right? And so we have lots of resources from the practice, our breath, meditation, movement, self-study, all of that stuff. But we also have resources around us, like our family, our friends, our supportive community, sleep, like, many things like that, that when, what is the baseline that you need to be able to be, to function and to be able to be your best self so that you can do good work. And, many of us aren't getting those needs met right now, especially the needs for community and connection, or we're not getting them met in the same ways that we once did. And so I think, maybe it's really important for folks to take stock of like, what are the ways you can resource yourself? Like actually write a list, stick it on your fridge or like put it up somewhere so that when you have those moments where you're facing doubt or anxiety or panic or, deep sorrow or whatever it is, that you can, get yourself to a place to process that and to be able to move forward. So, yeah, maybe I'll leave it there.
That's a great idea to create this list and have it ready to go, because in those moments, it might be very hard for us to see, okay, what are the things that I can really do?
Yeah.
And so in terms of, you had posted this question back in October of like, what's the future of online YTTs, which blew up and was fantastic. And I wanted to kind of dig in a little bit further. Like, what do you think right now is the future of being a yoga teacher? Like, what do you see happening now that a lot of yoga teachers have moved online? We know a lot of yoga studios have shut down. Overall, what do you think we're in store?
Well, I can't predict the future any more than you or any of your other guests, but I'll just say that, I'm noticing a lot of folks, and, I've thought about this too, that like, even if tomorrow COVID was settled or whatever that means, right? And I could, book in-person workshops again, like I'm coming back to a radically changed landscape and industry. Even so, of like many of the studios I've previously taught at around the country no longer have a brick and mortar location or have closed permanently. And so like, that is true, right? Like that's a fact that our industry is going to be, and I say industry, like yoga incorporated in the West is going to be changed by this pandemic. I predict that there will still be those sort of like boutique yoga studios that had plenty of resources, like those, places will probably still exist. I think that a lot of folks are going to maybe change the way that they're practicing yoga in community going forward. I think we could see a lot of that, online. I would say yoga and also fitness generally as a category, movement being put online as necessity through this pandemic has really changed it for a lot of people and actually shifted it in a way that has made it more accessible for so many people. And hopefully we can like talk more in specifics about that. But, just as the ubiquity of like, all your favorite teachers now are probably teaching online, that there's much more access. And I think that we may see some shifts about the way that yoga is practiced together in person. Like maybe we're going to see more sort of shared space. And so one person or one business has less of the burden of overhead of like a brick and mortar place. We might see more folks utilizing like rental or temporary space, like libraries and community centers and places and churches and places like that where, you don't have to sign a 5-year commercial lease, which a lot of our yoga studio owners found themselves really, kind of trapped by in this pandemic when there's no way to make money and you still have this lease that's like very enforceable. And so I predict that we'll see more creativity as far as like the types of spaces where we hold teacher trainings or classes or whatever. Yoga has been practiced for a pretty long time without American yoga studios being part of that, right? The studio model is pretty new as far as the yoga practice is concerned. So I don't think COVID gets to end yoga, you know what I mean? Like it just might look a little different, which I think for a lot of people is a really welcome change. It's no secret that yoga and the way that yoga as a practice has been influenced by and changed by, things like capitalism and white supremacy and the way that like are hyper focused on like physical prowess and aesthetics and the products and commerce that's driven by yoga, like that's sort of a uniquely, I think, American thing that happened to yoga, or at least like in the West. And yoga has been practiced a long time before any of that was sort of, before Lululemon, before the Yoga Alliance, before any of sort of our modern understandings of like, this is what yoga is, this is what a yoga class looks like, this is where it takes place, this is who attends, this is what a teacher training looks like, right? A lot of that is driven by sort of this this profit-driven model and like a capitalistic model that focuses on profit and that sort of thing, rather than a lot of the ways that yoga was practiced all along, which was teacher to student and practices that are done in community or inside the home. And so I think this moment is kind of a unique opportunity for us to be imaginative as both yoga practitioners and teachers of like how we can maybe reset some of the expectations around what is a yoga class? What does it mean to be a yogi? You know, is this, and there have been lots of dialogue and lots of folks doing the work of equity in yoga and coming back to like the core teachings of yoga and not this sort of focus on aesthetics and physical prowess that it's sort of trended toward. And so I think we really have a powerful opportunity, especially as teachers, you know, because teachers of yoga, we are the culture makers of this culture, and we get to decide and set the expectations of what this practice is all about and what it looks like and what it means and who it's for, one class and one student at a time, right? Like we get to set those norms. And so I think that there's a unique opportunity for us to maybe hit reset on some of the things that weren't working well for people in the first place about this like studio-centric model of yoga, if that makes sense. And let me just say, and then I'll shut up for a second so you can get a word in, that like I have many, many friends and beloved people in my life who are studio owners. I'm not like villainizing them in any way, right? We are all operating under capitalism and in this system. And I'm, you know, terribly sad for so many people whose businesses were shuttered as a result of like the government not being there with a social safety net for its people during a pandemic. And so I want to be clear that while I do think it's a big opportunity for us to kind of fix some of the things that maybe were wrong or lacking about the studio model of teaching and teacher training, that's not a criticism on any individual studio owner themselves. And it's not that I don't have empathy for people who are going through this. Like I had to hit reset on my business too this year. It's been really hard. But I do think that we can look at what the opportunities are coming out of this to create classrooms and teaching spaces and community spaces that are more equitable for all of us.
I'm so appreciative of all of that. I want to call back a couple of things. I mean, one thing right now that I'm hearing from teachers is that they're struggling with the marketing side of things. Like they wanted to show up and teach. So this is one place where we're really missing that studio model, that person that was guiding us and saying, just show up and teach and I'll send out the flyers and the emails and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. Another struggle I'm hearing is I can't see my students, you know, in the same way. I don't want to ask them to like move their position or whatever, change positions. But you also said that yoga is more accessible. So I know I've thrown 3 things at you, but like that accessibility, you know, the visual and the not able to be there in person, and then also the marketing side of things, if you want to touch on any of that. And yeah. Also, if our people who are watching live have questions, put them in the comments and I'll try and pull in as many as I can.
Yeah, for sure. And I can go back to the comments later and try to answer some questions too. Maybe I'll speak to the accessibility piece first, because I do feel that, you know, Zoom, well, I'll just say Zoom loosely, but like going online, right? Going online has changed a lot of things about the accessibility of, we'll say, fitness and movement practices, and also just yoga, access to yoga. You know, I think that moving online for a lot of students has removed a lot of the visible and invisible barriers that exist in yoga culture in the West. And if you're someone who's listening to this thinking like, what barriers to yoga culture, or how could anyone ever feel unsafe walking into a yoga studio? Just know that like that means you are centered in that space, and that's great. It's so wonderful that people have this, sanctuary of practice where they can go and feel really safe. But also, there are many people for whom the studio model is not financially accessible, not physically accessible. If you need the aid of like a wheelchair or a mobility device to access public space, having access to childcare, the sort of emotional barriers that come up for marginalized folks who are often facing hostility in fitness spaces. I think about myself and many other people in larger bodies or people of color who have experienced hostility in these fitness environments. And, I think these barriers are often a byproduct of how, capitalism and white supremacy show up and influence the practice. And we've talked about some of those things, like the extreme emphasis on physical prowess and aesthetics and having the right body and the right clothes and all that kind of stuff that shows up in yoga marketing and the way that capitalism has influenced yoga. And so, I think that online yoga can also level the playing field for folks who are maybe disabled or chronically ill or neurodiverse, right? Where these more predictable environments and they're more able to control and have agency over their own environment and their own body in a way that didn't always happen when you walk into a classroom or when you come into a classroom and there's a teacher there who sort of, as part of yoga culture, can often impose their will on the students. We've all probably received a hands-on assist that we didn't want or that didn't work for us, and that's one example of how, consent has shifted a little bit with these online spaces, that the student actually has more agency. And so I think that, with teaching online is definitely not going away. And I think when we approach this, we have to start to approach it as if it was a viable alternative and sometimes a preferred alternative for some of our students, rather than the last resort, or we only doing this because we're forced to. And, I really appreciate the perspective of some of my friends and colleagues who are disabled teachers, neurodiverse teachers. Laura Sharkey is one of the folks that comes to mind that, really, when I was having this discussion, was kind of pushing on me a little bit to be like, hey, it's not like we're doing this and now we have to figure out how to make online teaching as good as in person. But for some of us out here, this is actually working a lot better. And, I think that we have an opportunity maybe to shift from, let me back up a second. With accessibility, the question that I like to encourage teachers to ask is where does the power live right now? And you can do this not only in your yoga classroom, but in your life, and start to notice where does the power reside in any given situation? And so yoga teachers, we hold a lot of power in that teacher-student relationship, right? Students are coming to us at the very least for a safe place to move their bodies. A lot of people are coming for much more, a place to reduce stress or have tools for working with their own, anxiety or depression, or they're looking for spiritual guidance, right? We get students that come to us expecting a lot. And so we do have a lot of power, whether we deserve that or not. And I think part of this accessibility and part of what's exciting to me about how moving online has democratized the practice and the teaching a little bit is that it gives a student more agency. We get to redistribute a little bit of that power. And when I say agency, what I mean is a feeling that you know what's going on in your body and you have some control over that. And by extension, you have some control and say over your life. And so when we make a conscious decision as teachers to flip that power dynamic around, or to, redistribute some of that power voluntarily by allowing our students to decide what they do with their bodies, right? This goes toward consent around touch and things like that. But it can also translate to, the way that students are able to now control their own environment, their sensory inputs, the way they move their bodies, what they decide to do in their own home, which feels very different than being in a room with people and feeling that sort of peer pressure or expectation to keep up with the class, to do everything the teacher says. And so I think that I just want to like name some of these things in case folks listening haven't really like wrapped their head around the ways that this, the way, you know, it's asked a lot of us as teachers to shift our teaching practice and learn all these new skills. But for many of our students, it's really working a lot better for them. And so I think a dialogue with our students and what they need to be supported in class might be a really good place to start. Like, what about this has been harder for you? What about this has been easy for you? What's working, what's not? And that is a place where maybe we can start taking in some input as teachers and understanding like how we can make things more accessible or give students the resources they need to be able to participate. Because I don't know if y'all have noticed, like I've noticed that more people's voices are being heard right now that there's like a chat, because some people don't feel comfortable speaking out, or maybe that's not their preferred way of communicating, but they're very thoughtful comments coming in via the chat, right? And I think for some folks who maybe, you know, are deaf or hard of hearing, like now having every class potentially have the option to be closed captioned with a lot of the tech and the tools that's available for us to do that, having recordings and transcripts for people that are different types of learners who maybe will do better with more time to reflect and to listen rather than a live and online format. So we can start to see the advantages of these new ways that we're having to learn and to present and teach, as well as like the ways they don't quite measure up. You know, like we can't really affect one another's nervous systems in the same way as we do when we're energetically in a room together. So maybe I'll just pause there and see if you want to chat any more about that. I know you had some other topics we can go into.
Well, I love this about the accessibility and also looking at who holds the power just within that teacher-student dynamic. You know, I'm sure we've all been in a class where a student says, where should I be feeling this? And that moment to like give the power back to that person is to say, where are you feeling it? Like, how are we supposed to know? But often our students are coming to us expecting that we have more answers about their body than they do. So I'm glad you brought that forward. I am seeing, and I'm so glad that Kimberly put it in here as a question, and correct me if I'm not getting this question right, Kimberly, but one thing I just want to add on to this is I'm seeing that our younger yoga practitioners, so kids, you know, parents are like, my kid's on the screen all day. The last thing I'm going to do is put them on an online yoga class. And also our people, I don't want to just say seniors and lump them all in, because I know some seniors that are rocking, you know, online yoga classes or anything online. But those are the two groups of people that I see kind of missing out on this. So I don't know if you see the same thing.
You know, I've heard that from some folks, and I also know some folks that have had really strong retention with their communities, which a lot of them are teaching like older folks. And I think the difference that I've seen, and this, you know, may not be true in every case, this is just my observation, is that for the folks who have had more retention of their students, especially when it's an older crowd, I don't know a lot of people that teach kids, so I can't totally speak to that. They spent a lot of time dialoguing with their students and being thoughtful about the ways that they deliver it. So I know some folks have preferred to do like recorded formats for their classes, because that's worked better when they can get everyone together sort of around one screen, and it's not sort of a, you know, like if they're all tuned into the same stream, they don't have to be in the same room. And for some folks, the recorded formats have worked better because, you know, if we're talking about folks at an assisted living facility or something like that, you know, there's maybe someone there that can assist with the technology and that kind of thing. I think that it might just take a little bit more care and thoughtfulness around the setting up the norms of like the new space. You know, even when we go to start a new class, you know, we probably spend time in dialogue with that studio owner or the person who has the space, and we take care in setting up our classroom and making sure everyone has props and things like that. I would say there are probably equivalents to that need to happen in the online space, right? It may mean that you need to create some sort of video that explains like an onboarding process, right? A video that explains like how we use Zoom. We've done that for the accessible yoga training. which has been moved completely online for the foreseeable future. And so we created videos on how to use the dashboard and how to use Zoom and what we use the chat for and how to change your pronouns on the thing, you know, like all those little sort of tips that maybe some of us who have grown up with technology being so ubiquitous, it's second nature. But for many people, that's sort of the barrier, is like there's a big learning curve with these new devices or apps or technologies that they haven't had a lot of experience with. And so just like we, you know, don't go into a yoga class and just like bark out the names of poses to complete beginners, right? They won't know what Virabhadrasana 3 is if we don't break it down step by step. I think that we have to take some care in creating new community norms and helping people to understand like why we're using this technology, what's great about it, and how to exactly, you know, use the parts of it that are relevant to them. I don't know if that helps.
That's very helpful. Amanda McKinney's here, and she says, I love that you're calling attention to the positives, the accessibility for online yoga. Thank you for sharing these thoughts with all of us to remember. I mean, we as humans can start to focus on like, this isn't working. I can't see my students. They've got their video off, you know. And the challenge, one of the questions or one of the threads of discussion that I saw in your Facebook thread that kind of spurred this conversation was, you had asked the question, what about the people who only want to teach online? Can they take a yoga teacher training that's all online and run with it? And I hadn't even thought about that. So what are you seeing in terms of our YTTs? And, you know, there's the whole debate of like, can you run a YTT? You said that you and Jeeva and I are doing the accessible yoga training online. So obviously you think it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, the accessible yoga training, just to be clear, is not a 200-hour YTT or any sort of like going from a practitioner to a new teacher. It's an online continuing education course. So, but many people take it, not only teachers. So I think with that, with continuing ed, it's sort of helpful to have like, you know, a foundation in, you know, asana if we're going to learn how to adapt it and change it, right? And so, but I think that it's worth, like, there are some people who are now taking yoga online for the very first time, who are becoming serious yoga practitioners and who want to become teachers and who'd have no desire to step foot into a studio because they didn't previously, like all their good experiences online. And so I think we have to answer that question, whether or not folks want to, right? That we've sort of gotten used to this studio model and in-person model because that's like what we're used to and what, you know, the Yoga Alliance decided that it needs to be 200 hours of training. It's not that that's like the best amount of hour. You know what I mean? So like we have this blueprint that we're following that for a lot of ways is arbitrary or benefits, you know, the people, the systems, the commerce-driven industries that like set up the way yoga is practiced in the West. And I'm going to go back to this thing that I said before about, I think we have an opportunity to reset the expectations of what does a yoga class look like? Which, you know, informs what does a yoga teacher training look like, especially if we're talking about an online yoga class. But I think this applies to the whole thing. For example, you know, right now, if you ask just kind of any person on the street, like, what is a yoga class? Like, if you went to a yoga class, what would you experience? A lot of folks would answer, it's an hour-long stretching class, or it's a fitness class, or we do stretching and breathe, or something like that, right? I think that there's sort of an expectation that yoga equals asana. And so if the emphasis of your classes is heavily or solely on asana, you know, with maybe a little pranayama, a little meditation thrown in at the end, which is how I've experienced most yoga classes in America, then yeah, it's going to be really intimidating to figure out how to like tweak someone's down dog when you can barely see them. Do you know what I mean? But I think we have to get really honest with ourselves about what we're actually teaching. Because I just want to ask a question of everyone that's listening, and this is not to set myself as some sort of expert or anything, because I probably answer no to this question too, but like, do you actually understand what you're doing when you ask someone to fix or tweak their asana, right? Do you really know that a certain alignment in a pose or whatever is best for that body? Are you even seeing alignment correctly in that body? Or are you seeing bodies that maybe you're not used to seeing in your studio now that we have much more diverse folks practicing online? Like, I just want to ask these questions because, you know, students rely on us to tell them how it's supposed to look, right? And a lot of times the way that asana is approached is, you know, there's this template of the poses and it's supposed to look like Mr. Iyengar looks in the pictures in his book, or, you know, whatever system we learned and was passed down to us. And now we're trying to take this system where we've learned this set of poses and we've learned these alignments of what it's supposed to look like in the body. And now we're trying to squint onto this tiny screen and figure out these angles of hips and all of this stuff, when actually a lot of us don't have the tools to understand what these poses look like in diverse bodies. We don't have the experience of knowing how to offer a prop and watch and see change happen and understand what that means. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that we've got a real opportunity here to look at, what are we teaching when we teach movement, when we teach, you know, physical movement? Are we wanting to teach our students like a set of poses, a set of shapes to hold, or do we want to teach them to move well? Like, what are we exactly offering here? And I'm not saying we throw out asana. Asana is an amazing tool, but I think that you know, when I think about like what is going to serve my students best right now, not even just like this year that we've had with the pandemic, but like in their modern lives, like, will teaching them, you know, to be able to do a sun salutation perfectly, one breath, one movement, like, is that going, you know, with perfect alignment, whatever that means, is that going to really serve them well? Or I don't know, maybe they need some space to talk about and process emotions. Maybe we need some time to do some self-study around yoga philosophy and how these concepts apply to our real lives. Maybe we need something that's more restful and down regulating, or just some simple movements like joint rotations and all the major joints. Like, we, I think, get really precious about having this, having the online class look exactly like the in-person class, which came out of a model that maybe we didn't totally interrogate or question of, what is this actually even serving our students the best that it can? And is it honoring like the traditions of this practice that we are, you know, I think have a sacred responsibility to really look at as like the whole, the capital Y yoga, the system of living the practice on and off the mat. So what is a yoga class? Like, that is a question I'd like to leave everyone with. Like, what does a yoga class look like if we didn't even know yoga studios ever existed, or if we had never attended one? Like, from what you know about the teachings, like, what's the most important thing in yoga? Is it asana? Is it breathing? Is it knowing about the nervous system? Is it the chakras? Like, what, you know what I mean? And so I think we can start to distill down, like, what are the parts of the practice that allow us to, I think, do what yoga is asking us to do, which is remember the truth of who we are, right? Turn our attention inward. Remember the truth of who we are. We're not our bank account. We're not our perfect body. We're not our relationships, right? Remember that we have that spirit, that humanity, Atman, you know, inside of us. Like, recognize that, re-identify with that, and then turn that attention to the world and make sure that everyone can experience that liberation. Like, to me, that's what the practice is about. And spending 90 minutes doing vigorous asana, does that get us closer to the goal? I'm not sure. For me, it didn't really. For me, asana was a very powerful tool and a way into the body, a way of understanding a body that I felt very alienated from years of dieting and self-loathing of that body. Do you know what I mean? And like, asana is an amazing tool in that way. So like, we don't throw out asana, but be honest with yourself about what we're actually doing in asana. And I think there are thoughtful ways that we can change and tweak the way that we're teaching. You know, Francesca Cervero is someone that I really admire, and a teacher that I think has done really well pivoting from, you know, teaching in person to moving all her stuff totally online. And she talks a lot about the case for teaching versus demonstrating, teaching mostly with verbal cues instead of, you know, practicing the whole sequence with your students. And I think there are pros and cons to both ways of teaching, but I really do appreciate her perspective, which is, are you able to see your students? If I'm way over there trying to demonstrate all the stuff that I'm teaching, I'm just talking to a camera, basically. I can't really see unless I'm running back and forth and offering suggestions. And so she offers to, stay close, stay here, talk, teach, give cues, watch what's going on the screen, and be able to offer intelligent and thoughtful, assistance or advice or praise or whatever you need to do. And then, back up and demonstrate things if your cues aren't landing verbally. But I'd say for teachers, like, this is a huge opportunity for us to teach our students interoception and proprioception and how to put their own hands on their body to give themselves feedback if we're maybe not there to do it, and to get even more precise with our verbal cues rather than like, we're all going to turn and face the wall because now we're all in different directions. Like, being able to come back to the body for those cues and developing the skill of listen to your body, which I think is like a trite phrase that a lot of us say all the time, but we don't always like teach that skill. And so now I think we have some opportunities to address some of those questions we get all the time. Like, am I doing this right? To me, if a student asks, am I doing this right? Or does this look right? That says, oh, I need to teach them some more about this pose and why we're doing it and where they may be feeling sensation, what those sensations are. Like, I think we have an opportunity to maybe dive a little deeper into some of the concepts and the ways that we're teaching our students that will help them to be more connected to the practice, and also like to find that agency, to take ownership of their own practice rather than the responsibility lies on us as the teacher to make sure everything's aligned perfectly so they don't get hurt. Instead of that, why don't we start to teach students how to understand the sensations that are going on inside their own body, what they mean, and how to address them when they come up? Like, if you're feeling pinching somewhere, what do you do? Like, that's something that maybe intuitively as teachers we know and we can offer a cue, but our students, like, if they can internalize that and know that, like, oh, if I'm feeling compression here, I can offer space by doing, by changing my position, by using breath, by bringing my hand there and offering some feedback. Like, that's a huge gift, because then students start to find that agency and that personal power. And that translates to off the mat too.
This is so great, Amber. Thank you so much for this. I love that you're starting to get us to think about what is the yoga that we think is really important if we kind of wipe the slate clean. I love this because this time gives us that opportunity. And also, I talk about niching down all the time, and I think this is really important. If we know what our yoga is and we practice it and we feel it and we know what has really helped us in our life, we can then take it out and share it. Jillian, thank you so much for your great question here. I'm going to try and summarize it, but again, offer anything if I'm not getting it right. So Jillian saying that sometimes when we're teaching online, it might feel like it's one directional, that we're not building the community in the same way. Those little chats that break out before we get into the studio or as people are leaving, or, that checking in. Have you found some ways that teachers are being creative and creating more of these connections and community online?
Yeah, I mean, I think that being thoughtful about it in the first place is a great place to start, right? We recognize the things that are lost in translation when we move to online, right? We can't affect one another's nervous systems. We don't get the water cooler chats. We don't get I was talking to a friend about this the other day. Like, now that I don't have like other workplaces that I go to and see people, like, I miss a lot of that social connection. And I think a lot of folks are feeling that in the pandemic, especially not just in yoga studios, and so I think being thoughtful about this is really smart. I think that there are, again, this is a place where we may have to shift the expectation of how much time gets devoted to what, and I don't think this means, everybody makes their class 2 hours so we can have an hour of chit chat. But maybe it means that if you're having an hour-long class, it's not 50 minutes of asana with you talking and everyone else quiet. you know, I think we have a big opportunity here, again, to redistribute some of the power as teachers, right? That it can feel very one directional, like I'm lecturing to you, you know, and no one else is talking back. And some folks are not as, you know, quick to grab the mic as others. And so I think we have to create intentional space for that. And so maybe that's something as simple as when you come into start a class, that maybe you offer a little centering practice so that everyone can be on the same page and kind of settle down in their nervous system. And then you do a check-in, where it can be as simple as everyone goes around and like, tell us a feeling word, you know, how are you feeling today? And you can use more than one if you need to. And, you know, that just simply that, like giving people a space to be heard, or asking a powerful question, you know, maybe doing a reading and having a little Dharma talk and speaking to something in yoga philosophy that, you know, these concepts, ahimsa and satya, non-attachment and all that stuff, is not just some ancient thing that we have to learn and memorize when we become a yoga teacher, like is very real and current applications to our lives. And so we could talk about things like, you know, how does ahimsa show up for you in your thoughts, in your words, in your deeds? Like something as simple as that, and having a discussion with folks, allowing folks to talk about what's going on in their lives and bringing them back to like how these concepts and these practices can help us to live more skillfully and more compassionately, I think is a huge opportunity. And when we get some of that conversation going, especially if we have multiple ways for folks to contribute, put it in the chat, you know, you can grab the mic, like having some facilitation skills and thoughtfulness around that, I think is really useful. So observe when you attend other classes, when you attend online events, like notice how it's facilitated, notice what's working, notice what's not, like start to like be that observer of, I think like the best marketers do this. We like look at what other people are doing and we not steal what they're doing, but say like, oh, I noticed that person like before their training, you know, they sent out this series of 5 emails and then they had a live info session, and then they did, oh, well, that's a really good idea of how to like introduce myself as a teacher, let them meet me live, and then the program, you know, so like we can start to like observe like what are skilled facilitators doing that really make it a more conducive learning environment. They're creating opportunities for self-reflection. Maybe that's like a prompt, and then we have a few minutes of silent journaling. They're creating opportunities for small group reflection. Maybe after we do that reflection, we break up into groups of 2 or 3, and Zoom and lots of technologies have ways that you can do that very easily. We have some discussion in a small group, and then maybe we come back to the big group for reflection, and folks from the groups can share what they've talked about, and then we can have a bigger conversation that brings in insights from multiple people. Like something like that can take 15 minutes to do all 3 and be very powerful and very, I think, can go toward building the kind of consistency and connection and community that really keeps our students coming back. And so if the class format hasn't shifted and it's still just you talking as the teacher the whole time, build in some opportunities for that. What if instead of, you know, a flow where you talk and everyone has to follow your choreography, what if you took one of the poses that you really want to work with in that class and created like a little mini workshop around it? And like, you know, told everyone like, come close to the screen. I want you to watch me and observe what I'm doing. And we're going to talk a little bit, and then we'll go try some stuff on our mats. And then you go back to the screen and they go to the mats. And do you know what I'm saying? So I think there are some ways that we can maybe break up the, or like disrupt that notion of, you know, teacher is the one talking, students are the one listening to, you know, yoga is a personal practice that we do in community. And so I think both of those aspects really have to be thought of and intentionally planned for, because it doesn't happen by accident if we're in this online space that maybe some folks aren't as comfortable as speaking up.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And thanks, Jillian, also for that question.
Yeah.
There are lots of comments here. I want to let everyone know who's watching live. Yes, there's a replay. Someone had asked that. And keep your questions and your comments coming here. Amber will be checking back in. I will as well. And I would love to know from an overall Let me see. Let me pause here. This is what happens in live podcasts. Like I was thinking.
It's all good.
I guess I'm curious to hear if there's anything that you think would really help our yoga teachers right now in terms of digging in a little bit more of all of this. Like I think you've asked us a lot of great questions. Is there any other piece that you think might bring comfort to our yoga teachers? There are some who are like, maybe I should get online right now. There are some teachers who I'm talking to who are saying, the restrictions in my area aren't caring for my students. I'm making that tough decision. Like we're all over the map right now. Someone put in the comments, I'm back in class, but I can't go anywhere near my students. Like there's a lot happening.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I think I would point everyone toward how could you be collaborative and co-creative with your fellow teachers who are in the same struggle right now? I know a lot of folks that are making it work, not because they know how to do everything themselves and they're some kind of tech guru, but because they have a team of friends who are all in the same boat. And one of them's good at writing, and one of them's good at designing something, and one of them's real good at tech. And now they've worked together to create marketing and together to, you know, learn the tech and be able to like say, this is the system we need to set up to take payments and schedule and whatever. And so like identify within your own community, you know, whether that's locally based because you're still, you know, teaching in-person classes or considering how that might look in the future, or whether that's online through the connections that you've made, like what resources are available to you and how could you maybe collaborate and co-create with teachers around you to be able to serve all of your students in a more robust way and in a way that's not going to deplete each of you. Like, do you know what I mean? Like if I only know about, maybe I'm a person that's strong on the tech side, but I'm not a good writer or marketer, or I don't know how to design things or whatever to promote these offerings. Maybe I can partner up with someone who is, and they are not comfortable with as much of the tech side. And then like neither of us has to like do that huge learning curve of trying to become good at a whole nother subset if we can work together. And I think that, you know, there's a tendency to feel like, oh no, well, like, aren't we in competition? And won't it, you know, be detrimental to me as a teacher if I let some of my students like go to this other person or what, you know, like I think a lot of that comes up. And I just want to say that I think that's the wrong way to think about this, that capitalism and white supremacy have definitely trained us into binary thinking, and everything is black and white, and either you get the student or I do. There's a winner or loser, right? Like all of those types of things. There's scarcity. Everything's a competition. Like all of that's real good for, you know, the bottom line, right? Convincing folks that like it's all a competition. But we're all yogis here. So like duality is a thing that we should be trying to familiarize ourselves with and get comfortable with. It's never like one or the other. It's always both and. And I think this applies here as well, that like, I don't think that you should be afraid of competition as a yoga teacher, as long as you're sure about who you are, you're connected to your practice, and you can make your students care about that. Like, you know, I know that you talk a lot about like finding your niche and like making sure that you're really clear about like who you are and what you're offering. And I think this is a really excellent time for teachers to get in touch with that. Like, what is your mission? Why are you here? Why do you want to be a yoga teacher? And let that inform, you know, because that's a very different intention for many people. You know, some people really I think want to help folks reduce stress. Some folks really want to care for a specific subset of their community that's not being cared for. Others really want to, you know, have these like 90-minute sweaty vinyasa classes. Like you may have a different mission as a teacher, but I think this is a excellent time to get back in touch with what's your why and why are you here? Why do you want to share these practices with folks? What do you have to uniquely offer, whether you learn that in yoga teacher training or not? Right? Like a lot of the skills that I've built have come from, you know, I worked in marketing, or, you know, I was involved in punk and hardcore music and booking shows like when I was younger, and that community building knowledge like has served me. And I was homeschooled, so I have different ways of thinking and problem solving things that other people don't, right? Like, what have you had in your background that's laid the groundwork for you to be able to show up in a brave and bold new way that will really serve your students from the place that only you can serve them from, right? Because even if I took the same teacher training as you, Shannon, we each have individual gifts and purpose and motivations that will inform the way that we show up in our teaching relationship. And I think that I just want to encourage folks not to get too bogged down in, well, Amber's been teaching online since 2015. Like, of course, she thinks this is easy. I can never, learn as much as her, or, whoever you are emulating and looking at and saying, like, I can never be as good at marketing as, whoever. That rather than get caught up in those thoughts, like, get back to the core of why you're doing this in the first place, reconnect with that purpose and that mission, talk to your students, find out what they need. And really consider the ways that you're uniquely gifted to show up and to serve, rather than trying to show up and serve like me or like Shannon or like someone else that you think is like, got it figured out. And so maybe I'll just leave it there.
This is amazing. I love how there's both things, that we can collaborate with other people and to really figure out who we are as an individual. I think that's gold. I want to tell you and just share, like, podcasting is one whole thing. Like, podcasting for yoga teachers is something that I have to continuously come back to my why. We get a big question like, does politics belong in yoga? That's the intro and outro I have to do this week. And I've been thrown off completely. And I have to come back to, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because a bunch of yoga teachers were asking the question, and I'm putting the content out there that I hope helps them. And I love how you said connect with your students. Like, if your students were coming to you because they have shoulder pain, ask them more about their shoulder pain and talk more about shoulder pain. That's amazing. Also, this is a very selfish question and one that you're probably not expecting, but I spoke with Jivana when he was here live, and I said, like, Amber needs to run as a politician. So I just wonder if that's ever in your plans.
I think the people that want me to run for office don't know that I'm actually a redneck with no manners when I'm around people like Josh Hawley, and I would probably just tell him to stop being a brat and sit down and do his job. So I don't think I have, well, it's funny to say, I don't have the decorum to be a politician after we've endured the last 4 years, but I don't know. I think the futility of, like, working within a system that I know is, like, designed to not benefit people would really break my spirit. And so I've really tried to focus more on, like, community building and community organizing. And, I encourage folks to, I don't know, I'll just say, for me, I'm focusing on, like, how can I make direct change within my community? Sometimes that looks like, direct giving. Sometimes that looks like giving access to something, institutional knowledge or a platform or something like that. So for me, I feel like the impact that I'm able to make is sort of more in those ways. But I'm flattered by I do like making preachy speeches. So that part of politics does appeal to me.
Well, I love it that you're saying I can make an impact and make a change, and you definitely are doing that. I want to tell people, how can they work with you? I know that you and Jivana have a training coming up soon, the accessible yoga training. I'll put the link up there. How else can people connect with you and work with you?
Yeah, thanks for that. I'd love for folks to check out accessibleyogatraining.com. We do have a training that's starting on January 22nd and running through February 5th. And we have an info session coming up this week on the 14th. So if you're interested, you can attend that for free. It's live. Jivana will be answering questions and offering some tips on making asana more accessible. We'll also be giving away a spot in the training. So if you're interested, definitely click the link or go to the link, and you can sign up for that. You can also find me at bodypositiveyoga.com, which is a little outdated, but you can get on my newsletter list there and, get links to all my social media and stuff like that. And if you search Amber Karnes on social media, you should find me. So I'd love to connect with folks, and I love to entertain questions. And I'll check back into the comments for sure when I can. So thanks so much for being engaged with this topic, y'all. I appreciate it.
Well, your time has been like, you have packed this time, this podcast time, with loads of information. I'm super helpful. One last question. Are there times when you feel like, because you have a big audience now, because you have people who are coming to you a lot with questions, and I feel like you are taking care of a lot of yoga teachers, how do you deal with the pressure of that comes up sometimes?
I'm not going to get this quote right, but there's a quote from Audre Lorde that's something like, when I'm more grounded in like my purpose, then fear kind of becomes irrelevant. So it's not that I don't feel fear or pressure or whatever, but I do feel like a responsibility and kind of a grounding in love, even when I'm mad, even when I'm angry, which I feel like is my default emotion a lot of the time. Like I have to remember that anger comes out of this sense of like love and care for the folks, who are being harmed or the injustices or whatever. And so for me, I just try to come back to that when I do feel the pressure of, I don't know, like having a platform and having people that listen to me, and also knowing that I have many folks who, disagree with me or would say that I'm causing harm or whatever, right? It's always both and. And so for me, I think the way that I stay connected to my purpose is really remembering that, like, if it's not starting from that place of love, like, I can definitely get into the space of like righteous anger and like being right, you know what I mean? And so whenever I find myself kind of in that energy or like intention, it's important to me to come back to that why and that grounding in, recognizing my own humanity and then caring for that, and then seeing and recognizing and caring for that in other people. And so I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but it's kind of the place that I go when I feel a little like paralyzed with like fear or indecision or self-doubt, is like, it's not really about me. And so that orientation towards service definitely helps. So.
Thank you. It's amazing to watch the work that you do. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you everyone who's been here live or for the replay. Again, keep putting comments in. Thanks, Amber.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.